This is chapter 3, part 1. We're going to break this chapter into 4 parts. We begin with the self-concept here in chapter 1. Self-concept is an image of who you are, and it consists of your feelings and thoughts about your strengths and weaknesses, your abilities and limitations, and your aspirations and worldview. So there's a lot to it, but essentially you can just say that the self-concept is the way that you perceive or see yourself. We'll talk about the various things that influence the self-concept throughout this particular lecture. Whenever it comes to the self-concept, it's influenced by 4 different things, these 2 being the first 2, other images and social comparisons. The others are cultural teachings and self-evaluations. We'll get to those in a moment. When it comes to others' images, it's basically paying attention to how other people react to us. So whenever we interact with other people, we treat them a certain way, and so we can observe the response that we get, and that creates an image of ourselves in our own mind. If maybe we're attempting to be nice and the person that we talk to reacts in kind, then we would perceive ourselves as friendly, nice people based on the reaction that we got. However, if maybe in your workplace, people seem to just kind of shun you whenever you talk to them, they turn away, they don't really pay attention, they're rude, then you might come up with the perception that you, at least in their eyes, aren't worth their time. Another influencing factor of the self-concept is social comparison. Social media is a big factor here in today's society, where we look at other people's social media and see them living their lives, and we compare ourselves to that. We also consider how many likes, how many followers or friends that we have on our social media accounts. It's not just in social media, it could be in any social circle. Social media just makes it easier to see those things. When it comes to cultural teachings, we learn these things from the time we're born. We learn them by observing, by experiencing the culture around us. And we use these cultural norms that we learn as a benchmark for how we should be. And so then we'll compare ourselves to that. So we see ourselves through our own cultural lens. It's part of our self-concept. And then fourthly, you have self-evaluations. We look at ourselves, and we can either be fair or unfair in our own self-evaluations. These can positively or negatively impact our self-concept, as you can expect. If you think that you're not worth anybody's time, maybe that's based on one of the other factors here, people's reaction to you, for instance. If you take that idea to heart, then it can negatively impact your self-evaluation. So these 4 concepts, others, images, social comparisons, cultural teachings, and self-evaluations, all roll into our self-concept. Then we have the self-awareness idea. Self-awareness is a little bit different than our self-concept, but it's basically how much do we know about ourselves. There's something called the Johari window, and you'll find it in your textbook. But it says that there are 4 selves that need to be considered. You have the open self, which is basically the information that we know about ourselves and that others also know. Then you have the blind self. That's information about yourself that you don't know, but others do. You have the hidden self, information about yourself that you know, but others do not. And then the unknown self, as the name implies. This is information about you that neither you nor anyone else knows. These 4 things, which you'll find that on page 59 of the text, these things make up at least one way of looking at self-awareness through the Johari window. In order to get better at self-awareness and understanding ourselves, knowing ourselves better, here's a list of things that you can do. To grow in self-awareness, you can ask yourself about yourself. Who am I, anyway? On page 59 also, you'll see some instructions on how to do a Who Am I test. And you can look at that and try to get you to know yourself through this Who Am I test. Of course, you can also listen to other people. What do they say about you? And if no one's saying anything about you, you can actively seek information about yourself. You may not want to ask point-blank questions like, tell me about myself, or what do you think of me? But be more situational. How do you think I handled that? Could I have done that better? If I were to ask you, what do you think my strengths are? In some professional contexts or even personal contexts, those questions would not be out of place, and you can learn what others think about you. Accept the fact that you are not always the same person with all people. So see your different selves. Different situations bring out different elements of our personality, and our relationships change things. We behave differently around different people. And then another way we can learn about ourselves is to increase our open self, which basically means share more about yourself with other people. By talking about things, getting them out in the open, saying them out loud, you may come to some realization about your own personality that you've never had before. Then we move on to self-esteem. Your text defines 3 different types of self-esteem: cognitive, affective, and behavioral. Cognitive self-esteem thinks about the ideal self. Who is it that you want to be? And then looks at strengths and weaknesses and looks at that big picture there. Affective self-esteem has to do with whether you're pleased or disappointed with yourself in relation to where you are in becoming your ideal self, essentially. And then behavioral self-esteem comes down to how you act in comparison to the way that you feel. So if somebody feels very down but they act very happy, how do they handle conflict? How do you may feel like you know a whole lot about a subject, but put in a group, you don't have enough self-esteem to put yourself out there and share what you know about that subject. Self-esteem in itself basically just addresses the idea of how valuable we think we are. So then your text goes on to explain some ways that we can increase our self-esteem. One thing we can do is challenge self-destructive beliefs. Sometimes we tell ourselves that we can, the examples from the text, for instance, talks about setting unrealistic goals, which can be self-destructive. If I was to set a goal for myself that I want to be an astronaut, well, I can't really do that. I have a lot of different factors that roll into the fact that I will never be a NASA astronaut. It doesn't mean I could never go to space. With things that have changed in our Technologically in our world and with private companies that are now doing that, maybe there are other opportunities, but I'll never be an astronaut for NASA. It'd be an unattainable goal because of various factors in my life. And if I set that as a goal for myself and then I failed at it, I could damage my self esteem that way. So I want to do away with that goal and come up with realistic goals. I want to find a job that I'm really good at, and I want to do it to the best of my abilities. Another thing they suggest is seek out nourishing people. We have a word that we use quite frequently these days, and that's toxic. An environment is toxic, or people are toxic. Your text uses the word noxious instead. But they say to avoid those toxic people. Instead, seek out nourishing people. People who build you up, who build each other up, people who you can build up as well. These things will boost our self-esteem. Also be aware of the imposter phenomenon. Sometimes whenever we get into a job or become parents or anything along those lines, we find ourselves feeling like imposters, filling that situation, filling that role. I have no idea what I'm doing. It's kind of the way we feel. Other people will look at us and say, hey, you're doing a great job. And in response, we think, well, they have no idea how insecure I feel. So that's kind of your imposter phenomenon. Except that maybe you're actually good at something. Now, you can go too far the other direction and basically think that you are far better at everything than everyone else, and so anyone who thinks otherwise is just wrong. So you don't want to overdo your confidence. You want to understand where you are, but you don't want to undersell yourself either. Another suggestion is to work on projects that will result in success. So set yourself up for success instead of setting yourself up for failure. Remind yourself of times when you have succeeded. We've all had successes. We've all had failures. If we only think about the times that we have failed, our self-esteem will continue to diminish or at least to stay low. When you remind yourself of those times when you succeeded, when you put your mind to it, when you put everything you had into it, and it worked out well, those things will help boost your self-esteem. And then look for affirmation. Look for people or signs, positive statements about yourself. You can even self-affirm. These are all things that we can do to help boost our self-esteem.